Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's Story in the Cemetery. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Stories in the Cemetery, and thank you so much for coming back. I know a lot of you new listeners have come over from the Graveyard Tales commercial that I had on their last episode. So again, hopefully you're becoming a new fan of Stories in the Cemetery, and welcome aboard. If you've listened to the backlist so far, you know I cover a lot of haunted locations, more recently places right here in Charleston, South Carolina. So if you've been a long-time listener, you know that Stories in the Cemetery has recently expanded into a haunted tour. Guys, this has been such a blast getting this expansion up off the ground. I've teamed up with Charleston Cavalier Tours, and it is an interactive ghost hunting experience in downtown Charleston. This is a huge thing for Charleston here. There's a lot of ghost walks and a lot of ghost haunted places around here, but an actual interactive with tools that I'm using for this podcast and my blog is now it's an experience that you can pick up tickets for and come hang out with me, and with every single tour I'm gaining new evidence of these locations. And today's topic, the Pinckney Mansion, is one of the stops, and it's you're going to find as we start talking about this that it's not an actual location anymore, as it is just a site of where the Pinckney Mansion used to be. But guys, if you're interested and you're in the Charleston area and you want to pick up tickets, I will of course have a link in the show notes, but make sure you use the code word cemetery to get $2 off your tickets. So other housekeeping pieces, guys, and I'll just get these out of the way pretty quickly. I'm looking into which day of the week is going to be more efficient and gain more of your listener trust, that I will be a little bit more consistent with these episodes. This is obviously launching on a Friday. If this date works for you, awesome. Please let me know. If another day would be better, I'll kind of take a poll on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. Go ahead and take that poll, and that way I can gauge. I mean, we all have podcasts that we listen to on certain days of the week based on the date of their release. So if this interrupts any of your other podcasts, I do not want to take away from those other podcasts that you're listening to, because I'm sure they're awesome too. Again, right now I'm going to continue with Fridays, and I will post that poll on the Facebook page. And that, again, that's Stories in the Cemetery. That's the handle for the Facebook page. Very easy to find. Other housekeeping news: I have switched from Patreon over to buymeacoffee.com. What this does, buymeacoffee.com, is the same type of site, only it's a lot easier to use from your standpoint. All of you Patreon supporters in the past, I can't thank you enough for the support that you've given me, but I've already sent you an email letting you know that I was going to be switching platforms. So Buy Me a Coffee does not require that you put in any of your information, unless of course that you want to, and buying me a coffee just seems a little bit more relevant to my craft of writing than a Patreon. So again, I obviously love patrons of the show, but buying me a coffee fuels me to continue doing what I do, which is write awesome stories about haunted locations and my fiction books. Again, guys, if you want to support the show, I will put the link in the show notes, but you can head over to buymeacoffee.com and search for Nicholas McGurr, and you will find my page. Of course, you are all greatly appreciated for all of that. Last but not least, we are actually coming up with merch for Stories in a Cemetery. April has designed an awesome logo. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's the green logo that you see on all of the headers for the show and the blog. And that is also the same name, Stories in a Cemetery, that we use for the ghost hunting experience. So we're going to be designing some t-shirts, maybe some hats, maybe a few patches, those kind of things to put up on my website at nicholasmcgurr.com, and we're going to design a specific t-shirt for those Buy Me a Coffee patrons that reach a certain level. So details to come on that. I'm just super excited. Can't wait to see what April does by putting the logo on a couple of shirts that I can wear on tours and give some away at the tours and give away to you guys that are going to buy me a coffee. So guys, tonight we are talking about the Pinckney Mansion. If you're in Charleston, you know this name. There are several streets around town named after the Pinckneys, but the Pinckney Mansion is interesting because I stumbled across this site. This site was, I was just walking around downtown, the owner of Charleston Cavalier Tours, and we got some massive EMF readings from the site where the mansion used to be. The EMF detection, I've tested it in several different areas of the site, is basically a parking lot now. And we're going to talk about the history and what's to come of this site towards the end of the show. So right now, there are no pictures that I've actually taken of the site because, let's face it, do you really want to see a parking lot? You need to visit it with some of the tools on one of my tours. That's a bit more important than me snapping a photo of an empty parking lot. When I stumbled across this, I was like, I've got to add this to the tour. I tested it several days over. And you have to remember, too, that with the readings, if you're any kind of ghost hunting investigator, lead paranormal investigator, anything like that, you know that an exact replica of any type of data at different times, so I'm not meaning like 5 minutes away from each other, I mean like days, it's pretty much something else is influencing it. Whatever the tool is that you're using, say if it's an EMF detector and you're getting a spike of yellow that's got a consistent pulse, and you come back 3 days later and you have the same consistent pulse of yellow on your EMF detector, then something else is influencing that. With this site, no matter which part that I'm standing in, as far as the parking lot goes, I can't recreate the exact same pulse of the EMF detector, how the spirit box reacts, nor can I recreate anything that I've had in the past. So that tells me that there's some spirit activity here, obviously, and we're going to go through some of my evidence here shortly. But with that, there's a light nearby. It's on the back of one of the buildings that's nearby. And one night, one of my tour guests happened to notice that the light was pulsing in sync with the EMF detector, which both pulses were not like a timed type pulse. They were pretty erratic, which is what caught our eye about it. Like I was able to not hold up the EMF detector directly to the light, but from where I was standing in the parking lot, hold it up so that the EMF detector and the light were both in my view, and they were almost perfectly in sync, which means that the activity that was happening was affecting both pieces. And let's face it, a light bulb is not exactly a tool. So the fact that one of my guests on my tour noticed this shows you that the EMF detector is picking up specific activity. So, love the fact that I was able to do that. And unfortunately, none of us took video to be able to prove it. So I'm hoping that it will happen on another night. I will say that I took another group on the same tour a few nights later, and the light bulb was in check. So it was perfectly fine. It was on at its whatever regular wattage, and the EMF detector was still going erratic, as it does in the various locations of this parking lot, but there was nothing in sync with the actual light bulb. So again, hopefully that will happen again soon, just proving to myself and the group that I'm with that the light bulb and the EMF detector are picking up the same activity. The EMF detector goes off, like I said, various parts of the parking lot, and not always the same parts. I could have activity one night in the northwest corner, and then nothing the next night, or the next day, or I might get different things from the southeast corner. It just depends on that particular night and where our spirit activity decides it wants to show itself. I will say that there is a wall on the east base side of the site, and there is a conduit that runs along that wall. Now, I already know what you're thinking, and that there's wiring in there, and it's influencing, the tools that we use and the things like that. I have put the EMF detector right up next to it. There's absolutely no signal, and it's dead. I hate to say it like that, but the wiring, if it does exist inside that conduit, it's dead. There's nothing inside. We're going to move on to the spirit box, because I have pulled out the actual spirit box, the SB7, and I use, of course, the app at the same token just to kind of look for some consistencies. Now, the physical spirit box, when I hand it over to some of the tour guests, I hate to say tourists because nobody wants to be a tourist, so I'm going to say guests of my tour. That seems a little bit more relevant. So, 2 different people came to me and said, I heard the term "we will." Neither one of them really knew what the other one had heard, but don't know. I haven't found the connection of "we will" with this particular site, but the fact that 2 different people have heard the same thing out of the spirit box kind of tells me that there's something going on there. There's something with the "we will" that will speak to some kind of activity that's actually happening there. Now, I'm going to be forever researching this site because it is one of my locations on the tour. The term "we will," if it shows up again, I will definitely do an update on my blog, so make sure you're paying attention to those. And here's the next thing that's really relevant, and it's going to be a little bit more of an explanation later. During, the whole tour and experience, the name Lucas came up on the Ghost Detector app, and I'm going to explain that relevance after the break, but it wasn't near the actual site, but I found that it was a relation to the site. So we're going to talk about that as we move forward. But right now, guys, I'm going to take a quick sponsor break, and I will be right back. And we're back. So thanks, guys, for allowing me to put sponsors in this show. It does help keep things afloat for sure. Back to the Pinckney Mansion site. Guys, we're going to talk about the history. Obviously, you know now, the present, that it is a parking lot in downtown Charleston, and then we're going to talk about the future of this site. But the history of it, guys, this was Charles and Eliza Lucas Pinckney's home. I'm going to focus here on Eliza, and if you notice, I said the name Eliza Lucas Pinckney. Remember, before the break, I mentioned that the spirit box actually said the name Lucas. So here's the funny thing about that. Eliza is not buried here in Charleston. Eliza is buried in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We were standing near St. Philip's Church Cemetery. Graveyard, however you want to use the term. Without her being buried here, I found Lucas was just, hey, she appreciates the fact that I'm telling her side of the story to my guests of my tour, but at the same token, her husband, Charles Pinckney, is buried in Charleston. Who is Eliza? We're going to talk about Eliza because I do tell her story on the tour, and then of course with the EMF detector, we kind of raise some questions, yes and no's, like 1 blip for yes, 2 for no, while we're on site, which always makes for an awesome experience. So Eliza was the mother of Charleston's indigo crops. Now, if you're not familiar with this, the indigo crops came about after our rice plantations started to decline, and Charleston was kind of struggling for money. Eliza, originally being from Europe, her father had sent her over one of these plants, and she had a pretty extensive garden in downtown Charleston near the Pinckney Mansion site, and she was able to grow this crop successfully. It took her some time because of the different weather patterns that we have here. Indigo needs a very warm climate year-round in order for it to thrive. Now, indigo, if you're wondering, what does that do? It produces blue dye. That was a huge crop for us here in Charleston after the rice plantations started to decline, or fail, rather. So indigo is a huge part of Charleston history. So if you're from here, you already know what I'm talking about. But for those of you that are not from South Carolina or Charleston in general, just know that indigo kind of saved Charleston. It was a crop that we were able to send overseas over to Europe through Eliza's connections. So not only was she the botanist that started this crop, but she was also the businesswoman behind the crop. So Eliza does not always get a whole lot of recognition for this. I mean, obviously her name shows up in our history books. She is more, well known for being married to Charles Pinckney, and she was also the mother of Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. So if you know your Constitution, you know that Charles Cotesworth Pinckney was one of the signers. So her being the mother of, one of our founding fathers, on top of being the mother of our indigo crops, makes her a very reputable and respected lady in my eyes. I love this story, the fact that, the site of her previous home is right here in Charleston, and I stumbled across it with, just a standard EMF detection walk, through downtown Charleston to look for kind of some hot spots and to debunk some areas that might not be haunted, so that way I'm not giving, my guests any kind of false hope, like, hey, we have somebody with us. I will say, I don't make anything up on this tour. We take the evidence that we're handed and we kind of interpret it and or debunk it. I'm not going to, make things exciting just because, these folks paid for tickets or you have paid for tickets, and this is the real deal. So for every single tour that I give, it's the real data and facts that we are analyzing. With her being the mother of Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, the mother of our indigo crops, this is a huge story. One that I will tell and stop at for every single tour that I give in downtown Charleston. So you already know that currently it is a parking lot, but it has also been a coffee house at one point. And it was an Irish restaurant called Molly Darcy's. But it wasn't the original building. The original building burned down in 1861. I did post some pictures of the ruins of the mansion, on my blog post for this episode. And you'll see, like, the pictures are jaw-dropping. Because when you think of Charleston, you think of our single houses, we have our piazzas, we have the front doors to the porch. This house kind of broke all of the rules and had the most luxurious pieces of materials and living style that you could pretty much have in downtown Charleston. It kind of changed the face of how we were building homes, and it also helped a lot of the different architects coming down here to develop a new style of home, so that way Charleston wasn't just kind of like a cookie cutter, this is the way we build our homes. So everybody was trying to see what the Pinckneys were doing, so that way they can mimic it in their own home, whether they had a new style of these homes or not. So the parking lot, it is kind of a ground dirt. It's not like a blacktop style parking lot. There's some concerns here because it's about to turn into a hotel in the near future. So 2020, 2021, somewhere in that area. You can actually check out the story on the Post and Courier, our Charleston newspaper. There's links to it in my blog. But it talks about how archaeologists and the historians here in Charleston, like, we're afraid that there are things that are going to be in that ground before they put the hotel on there if we don't do an archaeological dig and we learn more about slave quarters. We learn more about the Pinckneys themselves. We learn about the time period. Again, I mean, this house was built in 1746, and it stayed up until 1861. That was one of the great fires here in Charleston. If you know anything about Charleston's history and you've been listening to this podcast, you know we've had a lot of catastrophes, hurricanes, fires, you name it. And it actually helped construct some of the way we build our houses and our things now. But again, I mean, this house lasted, 115 years, and you could see the ruins right on the blog, and pieces of the house are missing. The chimney is exposed. Like, this is a big deal. We can learn a lot about the Pinckneys in that time period if we would just do an archaeological dig. Now, of course, according to my interpretation, of what I got out of the article and what's happening with this site is that it's just going to cost too much money to do a dig before the hotel goes on this site. Now, money is always a factor when it comes to any kind of preservations of our town, especially downtown, because it is a huge piece of our American history. Let's face it, our founding father, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, was pretty much raised in this home. Now, the Pinckneys did own other pieces of land, in and around Charleston, but this was the main home. This was where, the indigo crop started. This is a huge piece of our history that any archaeologist or historian or any of the other tour guides, I'm sure, downtown are going to hate to see just a hotel be slapped on top of it, and boom, we have a new business. Tell me what you guys think. For historical places like Charleston, should it be obligatory that we do digs before we build new structures? I think we should. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. But I think an archaeological dig, and I'm sure that we could get volunteers to Charleston to dig in this site before this hotel is built. I am by no means trying to start any kind of movement with this. This is just, my personal opinion, especially after researching this particular site and knowing that there is spirit activity there, at least with the investigations that I've done on site, that we could lose a lot of the history and some data that we can use to further understand what it was like to live in those times that may not have been documented in history books. So guys, that's my soapbox for the week. It's all about the Pinckney Mansion site. If you'd like to see it, make sure you check out the link for Stories in a Cemetery, the ghost hunting experience tours. I will post the link in the show notes, and of course it is on my website at nicholasmcgurr.com. So I will also tell you, with as much exploring as I've been doing in downtown Charleston, that I have become slightly obsessed with a book that was kind of handed to me called The Secret by Byron Price. Now, I bring up this book only because I've been doing a lot of research, and you guys know, part of what my job is to put the clues together and to kind of, make the story come together. So I put the clues from either a psychic or a spirit box or EMF detections, and I put all those things together to make these blog posts and these podcasts. So when this book was handed to me about The Secret, and then allegedly one of the secrets is right here in Charleston, guys, I had to dive in. So for, I'd say 2.5 days, I studied this book, did a bunch of research. I actually believe I have some kind of lead on where this treasure is. Now, I'm sorry I didn't explain, but if you're not familiar with the book, there are 12 treasures buried in 12 different locations around the United States. The book was written in 1982, and only 3 of the 12 have been found so far. One of them not being Charleston. So, Charleston's treasure is still up for grabs. This is a legitimate treasure hunt. So if you are not familiar with this book, I urge you to look it up. The book is a print on demand, and again, it's called The Secret by Byron Price. That's Preiss, not price as in price tag. So guys, I've been obsessed with this. I would love to talk about it, but the person that I'm working with to figure out the clues and the walking portion of it claims that I'm actually really close, and at least he feels that I'm really close, and that I should not be revealing my own secrets about The Secret. Now, granted, I would love to come up with a partnership, with other historians and well-versed people to help me interpret these clues. If you have done any research on anything in The Secret, I would love to hear about it. Make sure that you leave me either a voice message through Anchor FM, which is the host of this podcast, or you can go over to my website and go into the Tell Me a Ghost Story tab and tell me what you've been up to with trying to find the secret treasure in your town, or if it's right here in Charleston. Again, who knows? I might have some clues that I'm willing to share, and maybe you and I could team up and go find The Secret together. But again, guys, that's kind of been my small obsession. Let's do a quick wrap-up. Don't forget, I have signed up with buymeacoffee.com versus Patreon. It's a much easier format for you, so any support from you just shows that you love the show and want to support my craft by fueling me with coffee, so thank you in advance. The other piece is there is merch coming. April is designing the merch as we speak. There are details to come, but there will be a specific t-shirt or piece of merch that will go to those that support me through Buy Me a Coffee at certain intervals. And then, of course, let me know what day of the week either you want to listen to Stories in a Cemetery or what day of the week you already are listening to Stories in a Cemetery. I know I've been very sporadic. I went through the data of when I've published in the past versus get this finally on a schedule for y'all so that way you can enjoy episodes week to week. Again, let me know. Go to the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page, and I will see you guys next Friday unless I hear otherwise. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.